All right, just a moment. We have a couple more people or one more person who's going to be joining our call. Give us just a moment. All right. All right, we are good to go. Thank you all so much for joining us once again for Saving and Support Raising for Missional Experiences. So for this session, we want to take an opportunity to one, just share what are some tips and advice for saving and support raising for some of these experiences. So we know, and many of our students have experienced just the work that it takes to prepare to go on a mission. And whether that's short-term mission, long-term missions, but it can absolutely be something where you really adjust your lifestyle to be able to serve, because you're not necessarily in it for compensation. And, so you may be living significantly differently, whether that's temporary or for a longer period of time. But we wanted to just share some experiences from some of our great partners and things that you all recommend as far as some savings and support raising. But before we get started, we did want to take an opportunity just to introduce some folks that are on the call. So for all of our partners and organizations that are present, if you could just introduce yourself and maybe what organization that each of you are with.
Hey, I'm Abby Brockelman, and I work for Christar, and I'm based out of the Dallas area. And Christar is a church planting organization focused on least reached Buddhists, Hindus, and Muslims, and other Asians worldwide. So we just desire to see Christ-honoring transformation happen in areas where Jesus is not yet known or worshipped.
All right, we'll kick it over to Josh.
Hi, I'm Josh Vinton, and I'm with Village Schools International, and we work in Eastern Africa, and we share the gospel through education. We partner with communities to build high schools for kids who don't have a chance to go to high school, and we send missionaries to go and teach English in schools because that's a big need.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Reagan, and I also work with Village Schools International.
I'm Herschel. I work with SIM. We're a general mission. We do church planning, we do education, we have medical. As a general mission, we do anything and everything we can to share the gospel in over 70 countries. I'm in Houston, so I'm not too far away from Waco. So anything I can do to help, let us know.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us and giving up just a little bit of your time just for us to connect and share some tips and some just advice and stories with our students for how do you share that story? How do you, really rally for support, preparing for missions? So with that in mind, how would you all describe, or what would be some great methods you all would describe for just sharing the story of, preparing? You're going on a mission. So for instance, we'll use short-term missions in this instance. So you're going on this trip, or you're interested in going on this trip. What's one of the first things that you would recommend students to do as far as sharing the word about this experience to rally support?
I always recommend. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Abby.
All right, we'll go Abby.
Okay.
We'll kick it over to Herschel.
I always recommend that students, young people, actually send out letters, still physical letters to, and sometimes emails to people that they want to tell them about their trip and possibly ask them for financial support. And then, but not just that, to actually in the letter say that they are going to follow up with a phone call. And then a week or two later to actually follow up with a phone call and make sure they got the letter, see if anybody has any questions, and then actually ask them for financial support on the phone, which is terrifying, but it is so worth it. My brother actually raised support that way for a short-term trip, and he followed up on a letter that he sent. And the person he was talking to said, well, I wasn't going to give, but because you called and actually followed up on the letter, then I think I actually will. So that's what I always recommend that students do.
Right. So we have letters and a personal follow-up. So folks feel really, one, I think that shows an aspect of commitment that you're really invested in making this happen, and you want to, you're willing to put in the work to raise support. So I like it. We'll pass it over to Herschel.
So I agree wholeheartedly. Letters or email, something, and in that the body of that letter or email should be what you're going to do, what need you're going to meet, and if you can, the story of a changed life. Someone that's been changed by that ministry, or someone when you've done missions before that's been changed. All those things, and the need, let them know what the need is. But follow up with a call. Nowadays with COVID, Skype or FaceTime or Zoom, those are all great options to meet with people if they're not comfortable meeting in person. I love meeting in person. I think that's key. And just telling them the need and letting them hear your heart and hear the passion of the story that you're telling of what God's doing in you and what he's going to do through you. If you need resources, there's a book called The God Ask by Steve Shadrach that's fantastic. There's some other books, Funding Your Ministry by Scott Morton, God and Elephants. But The God Ask is one of the things I really recommend people read. But yes, telling them the need and asking for them to partner with you. And you don't just need financial support, you need prayer support, and make sure you're gathering up prayer support as well.
Thank you. Anyone else want to share?
I'll add, I really love meeting with people as well. And whenever you meet with them to talk about it, you really want to know what it is you're going to go do. And this is something I would recommend before signing on, but really research the organization you want to go with, talk to people who have been before, so that you know and you're aware, is this where God is calling me? Pray about it. Pray about the people you're meeting with, and you want them to be able to pray too before they give to you. Ask them, pray about it. Should you participate with me, or does God want you to give somewhere else?
Thank you. And with that in mind, I think prayer in general, Herschel and Reagan, just leading into that, I think one of the emphasis when we say support raising versus fundraising is to go beyond just fundraising, because it's not just fundraising, but as far as some spiritual guidance and spiritual support and prayer, and just really being able to have a village around you to support you before, during, and after whatever some of these experiences are. So with that in mind, I'd like to just share some information. So how would you all describe some kind of different areas of community or networks that maybe students can intentionally consider as far as support raising? So for some of them may think, oh, okay, this is great. I have my parents and I have, maybe my church community. But what are some other maybe communities or networks that most of us have connections to, but we just may not always think about initially when considering ways to rally support?
Okay, so it's referrals. I mean, it sounds weird, but it's asking people that who they know that might be interested in hearing about what God's doing in your life and around the world, wherever you're going, whether it's Asia, Africa, South America. And usually they know like-minded people that wouldn't mind hearing about what God's doing. So that's a good way to find out and grow your network. And then it might be people you work with. And it doesn't, here's a crazy thought process. It doesn't even have to be someone you know. It doesn't even have to really be a believer. My brother's one of my biggest financial supporters. He is not a believer. So, think outside the box.
Yeah, I was going to say some other categories of people would be even professors and teachers from high school or coaches. It could even be your dentist or your doctor or I don't know, your people, just anybody really who that you have a connection with and that could get excited about what you will be doing.
One of the most creative things so with VSI, we've had over 200 people come and serve with us. And historically, one of the most creative ways that missionary raised support, they got their church and a bunch of people, I don't know how many people together. And a big part of what we do is construction. And so they had people make bricks, and it was like this fundraiser thing. And the church got together and all these people, and they had this, I think they like grilled hamburgers and hot dogs, and they made bricks in a field. And it was just it was a really neat way for people to come together and spend time together. I really want to reiterate like what Reagan was saying, what Herschel was saying with relationships and taking time with people. That's really huge. And it builds a level of authenticity. And then when it comes, as whether you're there for a month or 6 months or whatever it is, you sort of have a shared experience and you can communicate with the people as they're praying with you. And then also, in a sense, honor their generosity by their support. Be creative. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any, so that makes me think about just being creative. Are there any strategies that you all may have seen leveraging technology and social media specifically? So I think one aspect specifically, that personal relationship building and letter writing, and that's one of the biggest ones that we focus on. It's kind of like initially as far as support raising for Baylor mission trips. But are there also anything or any strategies that you all have seen online that have been pretty effective?
I think platforms like Instagram and Facebook are awesome for just finding more people and more contacts of people that you would then want to initiate with and maybe have a conversation with. I think there's a lot of causes out there, and so sometimes if you just put something out on Facebook or on Instagram, it could easily be just glazed over, and there's kind of sometimes there's like a bystander apathy mentality. If somebody sees an ask that's going out to a lot of people, they just assume other people are responding, and they don't have to. And that's a real thing, like it's a real psychological thing. And so I think Instagram, Facebook are great ways to reconnect with people, and even new people that follow you or whatever, to be able to initiate a relationship and invite them into supporting you with prayer and finances.
Thank you. Herschel, I see you are muted now. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
So I agree wholeheartedly, and I like social media for certain things, but one-on-one's still always going to win in that, because you're building the relationships, and that's really, you want people not just to one-off write you a check. You want them to partner with you financially. You want them to partner with you prayerfully. You don't want them just to give and go away. I mean, you don't want to look at them as an ATM or a bank. You really want to build the relationships, and that's the hard thing about doing electronically. I'm sure younger people can do that to a point, and they can get them to rally behind the cause, but invest in the relationship when they give. Write a thank you note, and reach out to them. So continue to build that relationship, and don't just look at them as someone that gave and now they're gone.
Absolutely. And I think that idea of stewardship is also pretty significant, especially to follow through and follow up with individuals. So after your experience, be able to share what some of those experiences were. How did you see God in action? How did God impact you? And I think nowadays, with our access to technology, I think it's very easy to take photos and videography that are pretty high quality. So, I mean, just off a smartphone photo or video, it's so easy to kind of document some of those things where like they may not have been able to be there with you, but it's very easy for us to, be able to highlight a glimpse or even maybe a reflection, just so, because I think in some settings, we want to be very mindful of what it is that we photograph or record, but even if it's a reflection. So after this day, this is day 1, this is day 3, this is my last day, or for longer term missions, how do you like document this journey and really journal those experiences and thoughts? And I think for many people, it just really warms their heart and that helps them understand and know that, they actually did make an impact. And then we emphasize that partnership. So this is truly a partnership in the experience. So thank you all for sharing some of those. As we think about, how much time do we have? Okay, we're good on time. When we think about, I'm trying to think about not necessarily just technology, but also just thinking about how do we encourage students to make the acts, because I think that's something that we hear often that can be a challenge. So we kind of walk through what are some of the ways, what are some recommended strategies, how do we build those relationships and so forth. But we hear a lot of students that say like, oh, I don't want to feel like I'm begging. I don't want to feel like people are pressure. I don't know if I want to call them. I like sending an email and a letter. So what is just some advice or even just like some stories that maybe you all would like to share about encouraging students to make the ask?
I like to think about it in the same way as evangelism. So when you share the gospel with someone, there has to be a point where you ask them to respond. And when you do, you have to stop and wait for them to actually respond and not try to back out of it or say, oh, maybe you don't really want to respond today. That's okay. But that's in the same way with support raising. If you're going to share about what you're doing, at some point, you have to ask them to respond. And then you have to just wait. Don't try to back out of it or give them an excuse to not give. Just wait for them to respond. And it may be a no, and that is okay. That just means you get to talk to somebody else about what you're going to do and ask them. And so being able to understand that, I think for me with support raising, which maybe this would have come up with another question, understanding the biblical basis of support raising has changed everything for me. And understanding that however God provides for me, it's God providing for me. And people are responding to God, not necessarily to me. And whether, so understanding the biblical basis really helps in being able to ask boldly, and then also trust that God is going to prompt them to give, or they're going to not be able to give, and that's okay. And being able to respond myself to that rejection in a way that is not hopeless or doesn't send me spiraling or anything.
Thank you.
Yes, good stuff. So yes, we're going to hear no. You're going to hear no if you ask, but you're going to get to yeses. It is the most I think it's one of the most faith-building things I ever do. It's also one of the most humbling things I get to do. We live on support and have for years. And I went from a job where I worked in sales, where I worked on 100% commission, and I'm still working on 100% commission because God provides each and every month what we need. And I know he's going to provide. It doesn't mean it's easy all the time. It doesn't mean it's easy to ask, but it's what we have to do. If he's calling us to do it, we have to make the ask. We make the requests, and it's for God to call it, right? He's gonna bring them to partner with you, whether it's prayerfully, financially, or both. And as I say, God, and as everybody says, God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. He owns 1,000 hills. If you don't know anything else, read Nehemiah and watch how Nehemiah watched God provide for all of his needs, how he prayed beforehand, how he talked to the king, how God provided through a non-believer, and provided for all of his needs. And be encouraged. Support Raising Solutions, Steve Shadrach, who wrote the God Ask, has an organization. I'm sorry, I'm not at a computer. Otherwise, I'd put the link in here. Support Raising Solutions has podcasts on this. They have video blogs on it that answers all sorts of questions. So if you look up Support Raising Solutions, I believe it's .org, or just look up the God Ask and follow that. There's a lot of good resources out there, or just reach out to me at simusa.org.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing the resources. Are there any other additional resources as we start to begin wrapping up? I see Abby also shared the supportraisingsolutions.org in the chat.
Thanks,
Thank
Abby.
you for that. And also, are there any other resources or recommendations that any of you all would like to share? I think that's always a great way to wrap up and kind of channel students to some resources as well.
I have one more thing. So we talked a lot about meeting one-on-one and calling and following up. A really good piece of advice I'd heard about support raising was don't let that call, the follow-up call, be the first call, and make sure that you're connected to people that you have a relationship already and you're already connected with them frequently before you make the call to ask.
Awesome. I learned to start doing that even with my dad. This is more so purely for financial reasons. Used to be, so he never says like, "Oh, you must want some if you're calling." So I'm like, "No, I'm just calling to check in. I'm just calling to see how your day was." But, oh, okay. But I think genuinely, just again, their relationship, and when people just feel connected with you and just sharing exactly what it is that you're doing. And as far as like, I think connections to specific experiences, I think that's where individuals can absolutely be maybe more willing to support, whether spiritually, financially, or both. When they've been able to see kind of your journey and your development, and they see what, you know, this experience could be for you and your faith and your development, I think that's definitely something that can actually make this more of a thing in which they want to support. Because as Abby mentioned, sometimes we have a lot of things that we can give to. There's a lot of need in the world. There are a lot of organizations and great causes. So it's not a competition, but it's absolutely something where you really want to, you know, share your story and what makes you unique. Another resource that Josh shared was A Spirituality of Fundraising by Henry Nouwen. So all those are great resources. And we also have a support raising guide on the Baylor Missions.edu website that's available for students or anyone. That's actually available to the public. So as we start to wrap up our time today, I did just also want to share some pretty creative fundraising ideas in which we've seen over the years with Baylor Missions. And these are also outlined in the fundraising guide, but restaurant fasting, where you designate a week for your trip supporters to save the money they would spend eating at a sit down or fast food restaurants, and ask them to donate it to a trip or to a team and so forth. And that could be a really creative way to rally support. Not to mention, I mean, of course, garage sales and t-shirt sales. So there's one aspect of clearing out some of that junk that you have or things that you may consider junk. And when you sell it with a cause and you sell it with a mission, you know, many people may be interested and willing to support you in those efforts. So those were just a few, and thank you all so much for joining us. And we're going to transition to our next session that's going to be at noon, but thank you all again so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. You all have a great afternoon.